Okay, here we go. All good, all good. I think we got it. Yeah. Well, hello to Texas and Australia, I think. Yeah. Tell me where you're tuning in from. The more I see it, the easier to kind of associate the screen names with locations, etc. Yeah. I think our microwave's gonna be going ding here pretty quick too. Yeah, we had some pretty intense storms. Yeah. When was that? It wasn't yesterday. I think it must have been Friday. I think it was Friday. UK. Think about going back to UK this summer. Trying to get that figured out. I like it Milky Way. Yeah, we've had some pretty good weather here just the last couple days too. Actually, slightly on the chilly side today. Yeah, north tornadoes in our immediate area.
Could get some freeze tonight from frost.
Really?
Yep.
I hope not.
Supposed to cover some things.
Wow, I was wondering because it was kind of cold.
Yep.
Like today, it was just not warm. Oh boy. There's some turmeric, that sounds good. Looks like you're blocked out, huh?
Yeah.
So who did that? Yeah. You know, it'd be neat if we could actually find like a manufactured date on this couch.
Oh man. 1972.
It might even be the 60s.
Oh, that'd be great. I feel like it's been, if it's the 60s, it's definitely been refluffed.
You know, maybe. You know, there's zippers on these things, so yeah, they could have.
This is like,
They could have redone the foam, but
either it's been
the vinyl's in really good shape.
or it's never been used. If it gets sat with like a plastic on it instead of a shed, instead of a storage shed.
Yeah, I don't know.
How's it going?
Yeah.
Is this bothering you?
No,
This isn't too much,
fine.
is it?
That's fine. It just shows off the
Trying to
vibes
find
of the jerseys, right?
Nice light.
So, kind of the exciting news of the day is we finally got some jerseys up on our website. So if you're looking for one of these, or I think we got like 12 other variations on there, but got to go quick. It took longer than we wanted to finally get everything coordinated to get the jerseys on the site, and we got to get that order in like tomorrow night, so things will show up in time for some other events we got coming up. Doesn't mean they won't be available again, but if you're looking for one of our jerseys. The time to get that order in, sooner's better than later. Supposed to be fine for our next round, but that order probably won't be going out until close to the end of May, beginning of June. Size chart for the jerseys. Well, what I found with these button-up ones, yeah.
I personally like the extra large, but that's just because I like a little bit bigger, and that's if you want that little bit bigger, I would step up the size. Otherwise, if you want a nice solid fit, I would stay your true size. That's about right?
Yeah, I think that these ones run pretty accurate size.
I do too. Yep.
They're not small. Like there's some variations that.
No, they don't run small.
If I don't get an extra large, it's tight. But these aren't those.
Right. I was gonna say, perplex, you will fall.
So
how do learn more?
How do we show you sizing? I don't understand how to answer the question.
There is a possible sizing chart. I actually think I've seen it.
Is there?
Yeah. So we could get that up.
Okay. Maybe it's measurements. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically just like the actual measurements of like what a large would be like.
Okay.
So that's not hard to do.
Which makes sense to just use something less arbitrary.
Yeah, right.
For sizing.
You can measure your own shoulder to waist and see how much further it would kind of hang off, right?
Yeah. So I am just shy of 2 meters, depending how you want to look at that, or about 75 inches. And with this brand, I normally just get a large, and it fits me just fine. The extra large is a little bit baggy.
Yep. And if that's what you're going for.
Yeah. Yeah. The first one on the site is like the wildest color that we're offering, and I can tell you I've seen it in person. It's pretty good. Yeah. So 75 inches in Freedom units, or 6'3". I don't think I have anything in my hands right now. Well, what is it in hands? Your hands are mine.
Yeah, my hands are not as big as yours.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the exciting news. Is finally got some cool things on the site like this that for everyone else to order. And yeah, what else is there? I don't. They sure are nice at festivals.
Yeah.
People really like them at
and they
festivals.
do have a Velcro.
Yeah, most of them do.
That is pretty cool.
Which is kind of neat. Which is right there, so you don't have to have a button in a really not great location.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It also lines up your buttoning. If you just Velcro that in the right spot,
Oh yeah,
it kind of lines it all up right away.
Put your buttons in the wrong holes.
I always start with the Velcro.
Yeah. What's a cubit? I think that's like a quantum computing data point. Isn't that qubits?
I'm not sure. I would have to look it up.
New titanium M7 in pocket. Not quite. I might have taken that out of my pocket. No, there is one in my pocket, but not quite what you think it might be.
It's an ancient measurement of length.
Oh.
Approximately equal to the length of a forearm. Ah, that makes sense. I have heard this before.
Forearm?
Yes, this is like some biblical
So, but what if you got a 5-arm?
Your forearm
6-arm
length is different. What's the average forearm length again? There's not one, is there?
You know, using body parts to measure things is arbitrary.
Ancient, basically, right?
But you know, if you turn the clock back, how do you standardize measurements, right? Across, multiple communities, etc. How do you get everyone to agree that a unit of measurement is whatever that unit is going to be?
I mean, we're kind of close, right? There's like two forms of basic measurement, but they calculate, right?
Well, so it's actually, measurements are kind of a fascinating topic, at least it has been for me. I can remember looking into this because it's a challenging thing to create a measurement standard. And of course, measurement standard not just in terms of length, well, you got to have a measurement standard in terms of volume too.
Yep.
And mass, right? You need not just those things, length, volume, mass, but there's other things too. Time, for example.
Yep.
I mean,
there is so many. There's still multiple ways of all this measurement. Like,
there is.
We just talked about 24-hour scale clock compared
Right,
to
but
AM PM.
But the challenge is, how do you standardize it so that everyone can understand that X unit of measurement is equal to what?
So would standardizing it be putting it in the center of some of these, or I don't think so,
No,
right?
it's just making it so that people anywhere can replicate
More of a simple
and be consistent.
way, I suppose.
Right. So originally, when, if I got my story right, when they were trying to go through this process, kind of started in France, if I remember correct, where some of the leadership was just getting kind of fed up with just not having standard measurements, right? And so they wanted to unify the measurement system. And this was kind of the beginnings of the metric system.
This was France.
Well, it kind of began there, right?
Over there.
And so they wanted to come up with something that would be at least relevant to most people on the planet. And what they ended up doing is they took, again, if I remember right, the distance from the equator to the North Pole and divided it by, what was it? Was it like 1 million or something like that? To get a meter.
Okay.
Okay.
So is it
There was some formula like that where they wanted to use
measurement?
something that could be referenced, right? And then they just subdivided from there, the meter being like the standard unit of measurement.
Right.
And the kilogram, for mass, well, they just had to kind of pick something and, okay, this is what it's going to be, and honed it in, and then everyone was supposed to reference off of that unit of mass. And for the unit of mass, they ended up machining a cylinder out of iridium, which is a very dense material, and just machined it to the point where it was exactly 1,000 grams.
Interesting.
So anyway, the reference kilo that changed mass. And I like how you mentioned that there, Bumpkin, because yes, they went very very carefully, machined this reference mass, and then it changed.
Interesting.
And why did it change? Why? And this is where it just gets even more interesting when we're talking about measurements and standards. Okay. Well, when it comes to mass is kind of a measurement of how affected by gravity an object is.
Right.
Okay. So if we'll just say the gravitational pull, for whatever reason, were to shift just a little bit, maybe it's a gravitational push, well, now mass changes. Anyway. Hello, caretaker.
So have we adapted good to all this, or is there actually just a balance to it?
Well, I think when it comes to standards, I think we're, as a civilization, far, far better than we used to be in terms of being able to accurately measure and communicate the mass, the length, right, the volume, or the time of something in a way that just about anyone else that we would be able to communicate with, at least in our civilization,
I
can
saw something
generally understand it.
kind of funny about that. Whenever you look at like the graveyard in Deadwood, and you see just like how many people shot each other, and
Oh.
it's like when we first got guns, it was like giving kids like some bad toys, you know.
Yeah.
So it's funny how far we've kind of come.
It seems like we've done all right.
Oh yeah, we're still working on it.
Yeah. And I'm with you there. Gravity isn't consistent. Well,
Which would make
what
it
what
hard
really
to measure,
is,
right?
you know? Yeah, I think that first jersey is actually one of my favorites. The most exotic metal you choose to make dynamite from, and why?
Exotic metal.
Well, iridium's one of my favorite metals.
Is that the dense? It's the extremely dense metal.
Yeah, iridium's very dense.
Yeah.
You know, it's debatable whether or not it's the most dense metal, because using weight and volume calculations to determine mass or density of iridium versus the other contender that most people agree actually is slightly more dense, but again only by a calculation of, I think, atomic spacing, that they can come to the conclusion that osmium might actually be slightly more dense, and that's of elements that are,
By atomic
say,
scaling.
yeah,
Basically.
can hold them in your hand, and they exist for more than microseconds. Because there are certainly some elements that have been created, you know,
Ooh,
that don't last
meteorite.
very long. You know, I was looking at some meteorite.
That would be
super cool.
fascinating. Yeah. Meteor. I mean, of course, I want to see like a solid gold hyperdyne. You know what I mean?
That'd be pretty amazing.
But it would have to be like pretty cased up, because that
Yeah.
gold would ding up pretty easy, right?
That's not my concern. Well, got a few seconds left if you're paying attention on Twitch. Want one of the jerseys we just put on the website? Yeah, get a colon in the chat. And be your choice of any of those jerseys on our website. Definitely feels like summer's getting close, although
Yeah, it's supposed to be
kinda
chilly tonight.
chilly tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Uranium baller.
I just don't know if I'd want to. I just don't think I'd really want to be using uranium for consuming anything.
Yeah.
Just doesn't sound like a good idea. Probably good to be back from that trip. I know that travel can take it out of you there. Hey, Hood Billy. Hood Billy. All chrome hyperdyne, huh? You know, you don't see chrome very often other than in like a plating.
Yeah. I always think of like rims.
Yeah, old bumpers.
Car, yeah. Chrome bumpers and rims.
Yeah, that sort of thing. chromoly is basically a rather strong alloy of steel. Be totally fine. You just have to be careful because it will rust. But, you know, I like metals for sure. You know, titanium, zirconium, hafnium would be a cool one. Is chromium toxic? Well, that's an interesting question. And there are certainly forms of it that are. But the interesting thing is, there's forms of nearly every element that can be toxic.
A brass bong would be really cool.
You think so?
Yeah, it just sounds like a trumpet. Or like a, you know what I mean?
See, I'm not too keen on brass for consumption purposes. You know,
It does, yeah, it does have a, like
it has an odor to
a
it,
odor, yeah,
and I'm just
for sure it does.
just don't care for that very much. You know, copper, same thing.
Cast iron, would they have to be like a casted Dynavat, basically then?
Well,
That's fascinating.
you know, you can machine cast iron too, but what would be even more fun is we could cast
Yeah, that would be really cool.
the stem out of iron,
Yeah.
which is just kind of neat. In fact, what would be the best way to do it? Metal 3D printed. You know, haven't done many of those yet. And yeah, the additive manufacturing
metal
is just
3D
such
printed?
a nice way.
I have heard of it.
Yeah, copper oxide does form with hot stuff, but at the same time, I know there's been a lot of chat about that. I've seen on Reddit, etc. People making quite the case for copper oxide and copper oxide nanoparticles, how they're quoting studies, etc. Well, there's a couple things that I think are worth mentioning here, and that is creating nanoparticles under most normal circumstances is not exactly simplistic. And people have been heating copper to rather high temperatures for a wide range of reasons for literally thousands of years. I'm not saying it's good for you, but what I am saying is that the small amount that a person might consume under various circumstances is normally not problematic. There's likely many other things that you're intentionally consuming on a daily basis that are stands a good chance of being more problematic.
There is something about Damascus steel that I really like.
Well, I like the layered metals for sure.
Yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
it's like putting two Play-Dohs together. If you do it right. you can
Kryptonite
get
now,
that
that'd be cool. Yeah. Microplastic. No. Not necessarily for. Yeah, I'm with you there, M. Ches. You know, the copper that people are using around their caps is not likely to contribute any significant amount of, we'll say, undesirable things.